What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Break Through the Silence. This is session 3 of the Betterman series. If you're just stumbling into this video, basically what we're doing is going through this 11-week course called Betterman Core, just kind of addressing the state of modern masculinity, men's mental health, and just really digging into that concept, trying to come up with some kind of blueprint for what it looks like to be a man in our current culture. That's the aim of this course. And so what I'm doing is I'm just going through the course myself and coming and sharing some of my thoughts and insights on it, as well as just a recap of the material. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, though. Feel free to engage in the comments, leave some feedback. I'd love to engage in the comments there. But basically, so we're on session 3 here. Session 1 and 2 just kind of set the stage for now really digging into our past. So this session is titled Unpacking. And basically what that is going to look like is just kind of how do we actually go about unpacking our past and our traumas in order to be able to heal from them. So last week they just, he kind of set the stage by, that session was titled Looking Back, but now we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper with that and really explore action steps to take in order to actually address the past and engage with it and not just to look at it. So he starts off then by, he identifies 2 action steps to take. The first one, he says, is unpacking, so sharing our stories, connecting the dots between our past and our present in order to understand more about, why we are the way we are, to understand our behaviors, and just really, be able to make sense of those things. So in other words, you could say that it's really just about building self-awareness, building emotional intelligence. That's kind of that first step, is to start to unpack it so that you can really then engage with it, which is the second step. So he says to engage our trouble spots. So he identifies these trouble spots as any unresolved issue from the past where lack of closure adversely impacts and shapes the direction and dynamics of a man's life. So I think as we talked about last session, there's just so many things that affect us subconsciously. I mean, so many of our behaviors just flow directly out of our subconscious and just what we've kind of repressed over the years and into our souls and our psyches. And I think it's just really important to be able to go back and actually engage those trouble spots, rather than just allowing the emotions that are tied to them to remain dormant and just kind of stuck within us, right? So even though we may not be thinking about them 24/7, they are still within us and impacting the way that we go about our lives. So next, he's going to start to identify some of those common trouble spots. And so we're just going to go through the first 3. He's got 6 of these that he identifies, but for the sake of this video, I'm actually going to split this one up into 2 separate videos. So we're going to go through the first 3, and then we'll continue later this week through the next 3. So number 1, he calls the dad wound. So here he just really talks about how important the relationship between a son and his father is, and it's not to diminish the role that a mother has, but it's just to say that for a son specifically, and I think in the same way for like a daughter, right, it would be really important to have your mother to guide your femininity, right, to model that to you, because that's really the best way that we learn, especially at a young age, is through modeling. We're not, before we're able to understand language even, like we're learning just by observing. I mean, this is how children learn for the most part, is just through observing their surroundings. And so I think that's the point he's getting at here, is that in order to really step into a strong masculinity, we need to have it modeled to us in some way. And so, yeah, he says, when you grew up, you didn't leave your dad behind. What he's saying here is that even when we move out, maybe we go to college or we just move on with our lives and go work and move into our own apartment, just because our dad is no longer physically there with us, there is still so much that we have carried into the way that we go about our lives and the way that we treat women or just friends or peers. Like, all these things throughout our childhood have just shaped who we are as men. And so he's just saying, just because your dad is no longer this authority figure over you, you're out on your own, there's still so much of that relationship that has been formed into your character and into your personality. And so he goes on then to say, absent dads can lead to an over dependence on women, or it can lead us to be overly dominant over women. And so I think this point that he's making here is that to be overly dependent, that might look like just relying too much on validation from women to give you a sense of purpose or identity, or to feel like secure in yourself, right? And then to be overly dominant, that can be, even could be violent, could be just verbally abusive, could be just misogynistic, whatever form that might take. I think that's kind of what he's saying here is, if we don't have a good understanding of ourselves and a secure grounding in who we are as men, then we may end up on either side of that spectrum instead of having just a more well-rounded, secure sense of ourselves. So, number 2, the second common trouble spot he identifies, he talks about the lack of a clear manhood vision. So this is something, if you've watched any of the previous videos, has already been touched on. And that was kind of the main point from session 1, is that this is the primary issue right now that this course is trying to address, is that there's just not a clear blueprint or framework for understanding what it even means to be a man. And so that's really what this whole course is trying to address. And so he says it's not something that we should just know or something that just happens. The real manhood is something that is taught to us. And that could be, like I said before, through modeling or just actually giving a clear outline of what it means to be a man. How do we pursue that in our lives? And so this seems to be, it seems to be what he's striving to do with this course. And I think that's a really important thing right now for us to get clarity on, is what does this even mean? How do we find a vision for manhood that we can step into and really, be intentional about pursuing. So then he goes into a little tangent actually about discipleship. I thought this part was really interesting. It wasn't really part of the main content, but he just started talking about this idea of discipleship, mentorship, and just the way that we tend to do a lot of groups, like small groups. And I think he makes a good point. I think it is important to have small groups. For example, I lead a small group with a bunch of young adults, and I think it's really helpful to have other people that are at a similar season of life to kind of walk alongside with and do life with. But his point is that really small groups, in his opinion, should be more diverse, where we actually have different age groups and people that can really share wisdom about how to navigate a certain season of life, right? I think for me personally, eventually I want to have a family, raise kids, and I'm not going to be able to learn that from someone who hasn't been through that season. So I think his point is that we need to have people, this is a model to us, he says, and it talks about Timothy and Paul, like how Paul discipled Timothy as someone younger than him, and talks about other examples just throughout Scripture where this is kind of the model for discipleship. It's like you have to have someone who is further along in their faith, in a sense, right? Like someone a little bit stronger in their faith to be able to give guidance to you. And I think that's just a great point that he talks about in terms of, clarifying a vision for manhood. I think we need to have that implemented, where we're actually pursuing mentorship, people who can give us guidance through seasons of life that we've never encountered. We've never been through this, so obviously we're not going to know how to do it. We need someone alongside us to help us through that. And then finally, number 3, so this is the third trouble spot he identifies as unprocessed trauma. So he talks about how tragedy and loss, like these things can cause us to feel like life is unfair. We can start to project blame onto other people and really just start to feel like the world isn't even a safe place for us. So he identifies then a couple of things that this mindset or this feeling of the world not being safe can start to breed within us. And so he says fear, religious cynicism, dark feelings of insecurity, mistrust, anxiety, and loneliness. And one thing that for me personally I would add on to that is just general emotional instability. I think trauma can really lead us to this place of just feeling like we don't even know how to acknowledge emotions, right? Like we are just so shut out from them. We've just learned that trauma just inherently just teaches us how to just push emotions down because they just become too overwhelming or too intimidating to even address. So it's like, I think over time, trauma really leads us to just start to repress everything, and we just don't learn how to address emotions in a healthy way. So he says that ongoing negative feelings of trauma often need the help of others to resolve. And again, this is just something we've talked in previous sessions about, is the importance of community, the importance of having other people in your lives. This life is not meant to be done alone. And so we can bring issues to God in prayer, right? Just one-on-one. And I think that's great. I think we should do that. But I think God has also designed us in a way that to really experience healing, we need to be in community, and we need to process through these things with someone else, whether that's a counselor or just a close friend, someone who can really speak into your life, and can sit there with you in whatever it is that you're struggling with, coming to terms with from your past. And so yeah, I think one thing when I went through my grad program for counseling that we talked a lot about is this idea of spiritual bypass. And I think that can tend to be where we end up when we try to bring it to God, is that we try to put it out there to him, and our mindset kind of becomes like, okay, well, I gave it to God now, and so I'm just going to move on. And we don't really take the time to actually process it, to actually engage in conversation about how this has impacted us. So that's something we definitely just need to avoid, I think, as men, is that spiritual bypass, again, because it's just a result of us pushing down our emotions, repressing all these things from our past because they've just become too overwhelming for us to even want to talk about or acknowledge. So yeah, that's it for now. Next session or next video, we will go through the rest of this session. So those last 3 common trouble spots, and then he'll also talk about some advice on how to address them practically, right? So thanks for watching though. I hope this was helpful. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to have a conversation. But either way, I will see you in the next one. All right, peace.